tutorial covers how to upgrade an older router from DDW from the manufacturer's firmware to firmware provided by DD-WRT.com. It's a free firmware upgrade, but it allows you to use your uh, use your router in a much stabler fashion, and more features are available that have only in the past been provided by much more expensive routers. So let's see how that's done. The router I'm going to upgrade is a Linksys WRT54G version 8 router, version 8.0 router. And it looks like this. It has some lights on the front. The light to the left indicates that firmware is running on this router, and the power light being on stably means that the firmware is running smoothly. The WAN connection indicates that I'm communicating with the internet. The 4-port switch shows that LAN connection 1 is connected and that we have internet traffic. The back of this router has a power plug, a 4-port switch, which I have my computer plugged into port 1, and a WAN switch, or a WAN Ethernet connection that is plugged into a cable modem. There's also a reset button on the back. On the bottom side is the MAC address for this particular router. MAC addresses are unique for each router, and sometimes those MAC addresses can be changed, but they should always be changed back to the one that's provided at the bottom of the router. So what's the first thing we can do here that will help you understand what's going on? This is a summary of the presentation that I'm going to give. Basically, we're upgrading a Linksys WRT54G version 8 router from the firmware provided by the Cisco manufacturer to free firmware provided by DDWRT.com. You can Google up this kind of router firmware upgrade, but what I've discovered is that most of them are presented from a Microsoft Windows point of view. So this one is presented from a Mac user's point of view. Now, why would we even bother doing an upgrade? Well, many of these older routers were developed 8 to 10 years ago, and there was a lot less traffic coming down from the internet. Web pages weren't as sophisticated and so forth. With the additional traffic, the routers have become less and less stable. And many times it's not a problem of just the hardware not being adequate to handle the larger amount of traffic, but it's that the firmware was never written or intended to handle more traffic. DDWRT.com firmware is Linux based, and it is very stable, and it provides a number of new features that are now only provided by much more expensive routers. One of those features is, say you bought a new router, but you get a weak signal when you're 50 to 100 feet away, and you want to be able to use your portable laptop computers or your various internet devices, and you don't want to run wire. Well, you can run this in what's called a client mode, or a client bridged mode, or a repeater bridged mode, in which case the Linksys router with the new RtrDDWRT firmware can give a good strong signal, can be connected either via wire or wirelessly, can give a good strong signal to these devices that are remote from your primary router and modem. And then because you can actually adjust the power output from this Linksys router with the new firmware, you can wirelessly connect to the primary router and then get a good stable internet signal. So, and then finally when we upgrade, what the upgrade looks like, DDWRT upgrade looks like, and also you need to understand how to use a program that's built into a Mac called Terminal, and some of the commands that are used for this command line interface. You also need to understand directory structure, what directory structure looks like in the graphic user interface of the Macintosh versus what that directory structure looks like when you're on a command line. All of these will be covered in this presentation, and you can, by sending me an email to al@avfconsults.com, I will send you the PDF version of this presentation so you'll have it as a reference in the future. Okay, so here's the router. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit first about how to set up your computer to make full use and to upgrade the firmware easily. First thing you should do is go to your system preferences. There they are. And from the system preferences, we're going to look at the mouse settings. Now, your mouse should be able to support a left mouse click and right mouse click, not just one mouse click, because the right mouse click really helps in doing some of these more sophisticated things. The second item you want to do is go to your network connection, and right now I'm going to turn on a network connection, and we see that the airport is now getting an IP address. We're going to connect to our DDWRT port, and we can see that we are connected. Now, the one thing I want to point out is show airport status in menu bar. If this is turned off, you can't look at your airport status or your internet status from the little menu bar. So turn it on so that you can. The second thing we're going to do is when we do these upgrades, we want to do them with an Ethernet cable connected to a LAN port like I showed you the router has. So I'm going to, rather than go through the airport connection while this upgrade is going on, we're going to turn airport off, which means that now the Ethernet connection that's hard plugged in between my computer, and I'm going to show you what computer I'm using. I'm using a MacBook Pro, and therefore, and I'll get the camera back in position here. So we see that the internet IP address that's been handed to us by the Linksys router is 192.168.1.138, and that the router IP address is 192.168.1.1. You'll have to remember this address because we're going to log on to that router's web page. Okay, the second thing you need to understand is that if we go to the applications directory to get to terminal, and here in the applications directory there is a utilities directory, and in that utilities directory is a program called terminal. When we launch it, it takes us to the root directory of the user that we've logged on to. So what I do is give this the option to keep in dock so that I have access to this terminal, this command line interface in the terminal anytime I want. Second thing I'm going to show you is that I'm right mouse clicking here. So remember that I said you have a mouse that can handle both left and right mouse clicks. Right mouse click, move up one layer. Look at the ALF address here, and what I'm looking at here is what we see is all of the directory structure in graphic user interface format called GUI format. We see desktop, documents, downloads. If I want to see that same directory structure but from a command line, I have to know a couple of commands. One is ls for list, and we see that we have desktop documents downloads just like we have desktop documents download in the GUI version. If I want to change directory to a directory in here, then what I do is I type cd, change directory to desktop, and now if we do a list, we see that the same folders and documents that were in that are shown here in the GUI version are also shown here in the command line version. You'll have to know a couple of additional commands like ping, and if we wanted to use that command, ping 192.168.1.1, we'll see that we can ping our router. And you press a command period to stop the pinging. Okay, we're going to use TFTP as well, which stands for Terminal File Transfer Protocol, but I won't do that until we actually do the various upgrades. Okay, so you see that there is a GUI version of looking at directory structure, and there is a command line method of looking at directory structure. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Safari. Okay, we're going to type in 192.168.1.1. And we're now at the upgraded ddWRT.com web page of our router. We can, if we want, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you full circle. We're going to go back to the old version of the firmware. We're then going to install the new version of the firmware again, so you can see how that each step works. So we're challenged with password, which the defaults are admin for the username and admin for the password. And when we get to admin, we can select firmware upgrade. But right now we don't have any files for the firmware upgrade. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the Cisco website to get the old firmware. We're going to go to www.cisco.com. We're going to choose support, and we're going to choose Linksys Home. Now, depending on what router you have, you're going to have to know what the router identifier is. I'm going to type WRT54G, which is right there, and I'm going to select downloads. And it's going to ask me what version of this do we want. As I said, mine was 8.0, and there's our download. You notice that the Mac shows you that it's taken and placed that 1.7 meg file in a downloads directory. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the